This is ICASTnews.com, live and direct from United Nations headquarters in New York City. And this is heat in the Middle East. Joining me, as he frequently does on these occasions, is the Dean of the Correspondent Corps here at United Nations headquarters, Errol Avdovich. Errol, what's going on this week at the United Nations? I understand that we've finally seen an appearance of the new special ambassador, the new UN high official in charge of trying to do something about the mess, the warfare, the bloodshed, the rolling disaster that is Syria.
Yes, this is Mr. Lakhdar Brahimi, the new special envoy, and he really appeared in short here at the United Nations.
This is the same man who we saw previously in a role in Afghanistan and doing something in Lebanon, correct?
Yes, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in every single hotspot area, I would say, in the last 40 or 30 years, including Haiti, South Africa, apartheid stuff, etc., etc. Many commissions and many peace initiatives. But he was here, indeed. He made appearance in front of UN camera, so nobody from us, the journalists, actually did have a chance to scrutinize him immediately.
Oh, that would be too dangerous to ask a real question instead of just putting him in front of a bunch of diplomats.
And he survived. He survived easily without those real questions, as you said. But anyhow, he addressed on his own one of the hot topic issues, and he said at the very beginning 2-3 crucial words.
What are the key things?
He mentioned that he's unsatisfied as the new special envoy with the war of words, that he's not going to be happy with that. So we have basically to think what we are going to ask him in near future. He also said that he's very scared because he is very well aware what he's going to face. And what we know now, what we understood actually, that he is on his way to Cairo to meet the representatives and the president of the Arab League, Mr. Al-Arabi, and on his way to Syria. And he is organizing and trying to see how he's going to meet Mr. Assad in near future. But he also said something that is a broad explanation of his definition of his work, actually, that the destiny of the Syria is in the hands of Syrian people. Whatever that means, it means that obviously he's assessing the previous Annan plan, and probably and definitely Annan plan is dead now, and that we are going to have Mr. Brahimi's initiative that we don't understand what is.
Well, we know one thing. It must be the most difficult thing in the world to follow a failed Kofi Annan, because Kofi Annan is an international diplomat who knows how to use public pressure.
Exactly.
He knows how to use backroom pressure. He knows virtually every leader in the world. And when he fails, well, Brahimi's is quite a mess to follow up. But on the ground this week, we saw something that's quite startling. We saw either the death or the assassination of one of the leaders of the Free Syria movement, to that big umbrella organization, who is said to be allied with the Al-Qaeda movement, which gives some credence to some of the things that Putin has been saying about not just automatically backing and giving arms to the insurgents there. Does that complicate the situation?
It is complicating the situation, but also it somehow gives the justification of this cautious approach of Mr. Brahimi. He was very, very cautious and very on alert, I would say, not to raise the expectations. Kofi Annan didn't do it, but this is also a super diplomat, heavyweight diplomat, member of the Elderly. It's the club that was formed in 2007 with Nelson Mandela, and he is really well connected. So he knows now, and we have the General Assembly movement actually this time, that two sides were judged and somehow finger pointed for the sending the arms into the conflict to both sides. Obviously, Russia and Iran most probably to the Syrian regime, and on the other side to the Syrian Free Army that is consistent from the elements that we don't know. So we don't know, or they rather, from the Western countries, they don't know who they are supporting. In a way,
Yeah,
in that sense,
that's right.
Mr. Brahimi was very cautious, and that is his explains his explanation, his approach that the Syrian people should do. That's the ideal, actually, explanation and position that Syrian people would take that in their hands, but we don't know yet.
Did he say anything about, we've had this standoff essentially between the big three in the West, France, Great Britain, and the United States, versus Russia and China in the Security Council. We see a slight movement now from France, an independent, quasi-government approved, quasi-independent initiative to bring in humanitarian supplies to help with medicine, to help with food in those ways. Did he say anything about this use of French human aid and other aid, clearly non-military?
He did not. He did not. He was very cautious. But obviously, there is a fight on the diplomatic front, I would say, since the Kofi Annan plan is dead, as we mentioned. And that when I asked, for example, the spokesperson of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Mr. Nazirki, what is left from the Annan plan, 6-point plan, that can be used by Mr. Brahimi, he said obviously those are the roadblocks on the way, but he felt short not to explain, not to tell me whether Mr. Brahimi is going to take something from the Annan plan. And I'm mentioning this because you're asking me a specific thing, whether we are going to have or see the creation of humanitarian corridors or something that would be that would ease the humanitarian situation on the ground. So he did not mention that because obviously there is a political backing of that, as the Russian are pointing out. They are afraid that these humanitarian corridors could be used for some kind of intervention. We did see that in Balkans. We did see that talk before the intervention in Libya. So obviously the Russian, as you mentioned, Mr. Putin, are repeating and keep repeating that they don't like to see Libyan scenario in Syria. And Mr. Brahimi is playing well, I would say, in that mosaic of requests.
Boy, Putin was very strong on that this week, although he was also very strong on saying that the first thing, I've got the whole text of his remarks, that the first thing that has to be done is stop the fighting and stop shipping arms in there. Now, of course, he insists that they aren't shipping arms that are being used
but they
to
are
fight.
shipping.
But
actually.
of course
the Russians are
Of
shipping
course.
and sending the helicopters and everything, and they are used
parts.
obviously against the civilians. And we have the terrible situation. The worst part, Jonathan, if you don't mind, the worst part really is, since debate is going on, the people are dying on the ground.
The people are dying, and I think there are two other things that are significant. One is, since the last time we've talked about this, where we made a big deal about the Iranian arms coming through Iraqi airspace, three very conservative, but on military things, very influential American senators are just leaving today from being in Tehran, where they were trying Senator Lieberman and the former presidential candidate from the Republican Party, McCain, and the South Carolina senator. The three of them are leaving, trying to insist that Iraq shut its airspace. And the Shiite influence in Iraq is saying, okay, Shiite arms coming through from Iran, we're going to just ignore them. That's dangerous. The other thing that I think is really significant, and it's a kind of practical problem Brahimi's going to address. Turkey is getting to the point where they are near the ceiling of the number of refugees that they will allow to come into the country.
Yes, they have said that they are about 80,000, according to the newest figures, with their accepting the Syrian refugees. And they are saying that their ceiling, their red line on that is about 100,000.
100,000.
We are approaching fast. And indeed, we are started to see the tragedies. Just few days ago, 2 days ago, we saw the boat full with the refugees from Syria and apparently from Iraq came nearby the Turkish coast, and they all sank and 60 something people lost their lives. So we started to see the same thing like we did have during the crisis in Libya and for the nearby the Italian coast in the very famous island of Lampedusa
Right, yes.
and the
And
humanitarian crisis. Apparently, the situation, what they say, deja vu, already seen, is repeating itself now with the Syrian crisis.
well, maybe Mr. Brahimi can do something on the very practical level. We know that the overflow is already going to begin to go into Jordan. Jordan's got its own set of problems. Jordan's one of the countries that's
They
gradually.
have like 380,000 of Syrian refugees, so that's really a
That's
burden for
huge.
them.
That's a huge number. And there, of course, they've got 300,000 refugees at a time where economically they're struggling as it is.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
so we hope that doesn't tip things
So I
over.
think Jonathan and Mr. Brahimi do have, and he's very aware, full hands, too much on his plate, and he's very cautious with any kind of predictions, any kind of promising something or so. And indeed, at the very beginning of his mandate, the opposition in Syria criticized him actually because he didn't use his first appearance to media or to the public, that he didn't call immediately for giving away Mr. Assad to resign and to get out of the power.
I think the only people who have a more difficult job than Mr. Brahimi, Errol, the only people are the people in charge of security for Mr. Brahimi as he travels to
You're
Syria.
right, you're right.
Well, I actually wish that you and I were on the trip with him, because if anyone was going to be safe, it's going to be him and the journalists around him, we hope. For Heat in the Middle East, my colleague Errol Avdovich and I wish you a peaceful week, and we're looking for peaceful developments, and I don't think we're going to see them, especially in Syria. For ICASTnews.com, live and direct from the United Nations, I'm Jonathan Sanders.